soon-to-be-disinherited siblings, who never searched for me, now expect me to care for the birth mother who gave me away. I, 35F, grew up in the U.S., born and raised in Austin, Texas. My father, 70 male, is Canadian, and my mother, 68F, is Greek. Every summer, we vacationed in Greece with my maternal grandparents. When I was 25, my parents retired and moved permanently to Greece after my mother inherited a house and a significant amount of money from her mother when she passed away. That's when things took a strange turn. During the last few months of my grandmother's life, my mom went to Greece to care for her, as she was no longer able to take care of herself. In her final days, my grandmother revealed a shocking secret: my mom was adopted. She wasn't the biological child of the parents who raised her. Instead, she was the daughter of my grandmother's cousin. Apparently, in Greece, decades ago, it was common for struggling families with many children to give a baby to a relative who couldn't have kids. My mother was devastated. She grieved the fact that she never knew her real family and that no one ever told her. After my grandmother passed, she decided to move to Greece to reconnect with the biological family she never met. She traveled to the region where her biological mother lived and met her for the first time, along with 2 older brothers and a younger sister. Her oldest brother was especially emotional because he vaguely remembered the day they gave my mother away as a baby. But from the start, my mom was hurt that none of them had ever tried to find her. Their excuse was that she had moved to the U.S., and it was difficult to track her down, while her biological mother said she had made a pact with her cousin, my adoptive grandmother, never to reveal the truth. The entire village had been told that my mom had died as a baby, so no one ever questioned it. For the past 10 years, my parents have lived in Greece, and my mom has built a close relationship with her siblings. However, her relationship with her biological mother has remained distant and formal. She never got over the fact that this woman kept all her other children but gave her away, likely because she was a girl. At the time, boys were valued more because they worked the fields and contributed to the family's income, whereas girls were seen as a burden. 2 years ago, I was able to move to Greece as well, since the parents who raised my mom left her a sizable inheritance. It allowed us to live comfortably, and honestly, I preferred the lifestyle here. We live in a beautiful place near the capital, and life is peaceful. Now, here's the issue. My mom's biological mother is now 96 years old and in very poor health. Her biological father passed away decades ago due to political circumstances. Her 2 older brothers, her sister lives abroad, have been taking care of their mother, but they are exhausted. Their wives are complaining, tensions are rising, and at a recent family gathering, they told my mom that she should also help take care of their mother because it's unfair that they are doing it alone. My father was furious when he heard this and told my mother to cut them off entirely. My mom refuses to take care of this woman. She doesn't love her, doesn't feel any emotional connection to her, and can't forgive her for abandoning her. My mom is not close to this woman's, and of course she has no legal claim to any inheritance from this family. However, she has truly enjoyed her relationship with her siblings and their children and doesn't want to lose that. She's feeling pressured, though, and she's deeply upset by their demands. When I found out, I was livid. How dare these people ask this of my mother, knowing full well that she was abandoned and that no one even attempted to find her. I feel like they're manipulating her, and she's unable to see how unfair this is. I'm getting married in a month to my fiancé, who is Greek and fully supportive of me, and I am seriously considering uninviting all of them from the wedding. I want to send a clear message that we don't want contact with them anymore. However, my mother is hesitant. She doesn't want to escalate things, even though she's hurting. I feel like she's not as attached to these people as she thinks. She's mourning the idea of the family she never had rather than truly loving these people. And I hate seeing her being taken advantage of. I always idealized Greece and the strong bonds of family, but now I see that's not always the case. I'm so disappointed by all of this. What would you do in this situation? Would you cut them off? Would you disinvite them from the wedding? How can I help my mother navigate this? Edit: I forgot to mention something I think is important. My mom suggested they find a senior care facility to put her biological mother in. She even offered to pay a quarter of the price. My biological uncles were offended because they said it was disrespectful to their mother to put her in a nursing home. Another Greek thing. Although they are generally financially comfortable, a quarter for a good structure can mean 400 or 500 person per month. Which, by Greek standards, is enough. I think their idea of help is taking her biological mother home for a few months. Update 1. I decided to share it with my mom and let her read your comments. She was really moved by the similar stories some of you shared. This led to a deep conversation between us. Over the past few years, my mom has learned a lot about her adoption. Unfortunately, my bio-grandma was not a good person. The wife of one of my bio-uncles, let's call her Maria, sat my mom down a few years ago and told her everything. Turns out, my bio-grandma was a very strict and spiteful woman who treated the people who worked for her horribly. She never wanted daughters and even tried to give away her other daughter, but that adoption fell through, so she kept her. My bio-aunt went through a really tough time growing up, and that's why she moved abroad. Her brothers never supported her the way they should have, and they even cheated her out of part of her inheritance. Maria is now thinking about leaving her husband since their kids are grown, and she doesn't want to stay married to a man she knows isn't a good person. As for my mom, she never felt a bond with her bio mother. But after hearing everything from Maria, she's decided she doesn't want much contact at all. She knows exactly what kind of people her bio brothers are and never wanted a super close relationship with them. They're not in daily contact anyway, but she does feel attached to her nieces, nephews, and their wives. That's the main reason she hasn't cut ties completely. My mom has decided she will help financially but won't take bio grandma into her home. She's doing it mainly to support her bio sister, who is under pressure from their brothers to care for their mother. My mom has tried to get closer to her bio sister over the years, but her sister has kept her distance. She explained that she has deep trauma from growing up with their mother and wants to maintain some emotional space. But she's still happy they met. This past Christmas, my bio aunt came to Greece and stayed at our house. I wasn't there because I was visiting friends in the Netherlands, but my mom and her sister spent time together, and it brought them closer. My aunt told my mom to cut off her brothers completely and even invited her to move to her country. She has made it clear she wants only a formal relationship with the rest of the family, except for my mom, whom she loves dearly. I had no idea about most of this because my mom didn't want me to see my uncles in a bad light. She still thinks she'll keep some minimal relationship with them, but she's especially close with a few of her nieces and nephews and doesn't want to lose that. One of my cousins, Maria's son, even confided in my mom that he wants to cut ties with his father. When my bio uncle asked my mom for help, this cousin, who's only 25, pulled her aside and told her to stay away and not give them anything because they don't deserve it. That really got to me. It showed me that not everyone in this family is selfish or manipulative. I actually have a good relationship with this cousin. He gets along great with my fiancée since they work in the same field. After learning all this, I met up with him last night, and we talked. He has moved out on his own but still keeps some contact with his dad, mainly because he wants to wait until Maria leaves before cutting ties completely. He told me that his father and uncle inherited a lot of wealth and never really had to work. They started some businesses, but when they struggled, they took large sums of money from bio grandma and other relatives. Now they've recovered and live comfortably, but they never paid back what they owe. My cousin is ashamed of his family's actions and doesn't want to be judged for them. He also believes they are trying to financially exploit my mom. Because he cares about her and really respects my parents, he warned them not to get involved. After everything, my parents and I made a decision. My mom will give one lump sum of money for her bio mother's care. Whether they put her in a nursing home or hire a caregiver is their problem. She will also have a final talk with her brothers to make it clear that she is not taking care of their mother because that woman was never a mother to her. When Maria manages to get divorced, which my parents want to support her through, we expect the relationship with the brothers to fall apart. My mom is still sad that she never found the ideal family she imagined, but she feels lucky to have her sister, Maria, and her nephew, whom she truly loves. As for the wedding, we decided to invite them to avoid unnecessary drama. That's the update for now. I truly appreciate all the comments and support. I feel sorry for those who have gone through similar painful experiences, and I hope no one has to go through this again. Lastly, I feel terrible for ever doubting my grandparents, the ones who actually raised my mom. They were amazing, kind, and compassionate people who helped so many others in the US. Everything they had was earned through hard work. Update 2. My mom kept her word and asked her brothers to meet her at a cafe in their town. She went with my dad and asked me to stay out of it at first, but I parked a few blocks away anyway, just in case she needed me. She told them, calmly, that she would give one lump sum for a caregiver or a decent facility and that it would be the first and last financial involvement. She added that she was not taking their mother into her home or into mine, and she wasn't taking shifts. She said it very steadily, like she'd rehearsed it in her head 100 times. The older one laughed in that way. That's not really a laugh, more like a dismissal, and told her that blood is obligations. My mom put the envelope on the table, said, "I don't owe that woman the title you are trying to use," and got up to leave. The younger one actually reached for her sleeve and asked for a few months with their mother at our place to rotate, like we were discussing luggage. My dad stepped in and said, "Rotations are for crops, not people. Keep your money or don't," but this conversation is over. They didn't take the envelope. They said nursing homes are shameful and so is throwing money at your responsibilities. My mother said, "I learned what responsibility looks like from the people who raised me. It looks nothing like this," and walked out. My phone started buzzing before she even made it to the car. 2 nights later, just after midnight, my cousin, 25M, Maria's son, called me, not his father. Their mother, 96F, had fallen. He thought she'd fractured her hip. The brothers were arguing with each other in the hallway of the public hospital about whose house she could go back to, and the wives were refusing. This is exactly the version of help we were trying to avoid. Chaos at midnight, and then we're the bad ones for not smoothing it over. My fiancé and I drove in because my mom was shaking and didn't want to see the woman if she didn't have to. My cousin met us outside and said he was sorry. He's always apologizing for messes he didn't make. Inside, their mother was in a corridor bed with a sheet pulled up to her chin, tiny and angry and talking to the ceiling in a loop. She thought my mom was her cousin, the woman who adopted my mom. She kept asking where's the baby, and then cursing her cousin for stealing her child. It was like that knot of history tied by other people's hands got pulled tight in one sentence. My mom stood in the doorway and listened once and went very still. She didn't step closer. I could feel her choosing distance in her body. A social worker came over with a list of options. I learned more about elder care in Greece in that 1 hour than I have in 10 years. Public care is limited and slow. The Help at Home program is oversubscribed. Private caregivers are available but not cheap. The social worker looked at me, at my fiancé, then the men, and asked plainly who had power of attorney and who was coordinating discharge. Blank faces. Everyone suddenly had somewhere else to look. The older uncle said he'd take her back but only if the rotation started now. The younger one said the wives would help until my sister takes her turn. The social worker glanced at me like she'd seen this movie 1,000 times and it always ends with the daughter caving, except the daughter, in this version, didn't grow up in that house. I called a lawyer we know in Athens and asked what we needed to make sure money didn't disappear into pride. He told us to stop talking in hallways and write a service agreement. So the next morning, we met at a notary near the hospital. My mother offered to pay for a private, live-in caregiver for 3 months, full-time, with receipts, hired through a reputable agency, and to revisit only after those 3 months if things were stable. In return, her brothers had to sign that they wouldn't ask her to house or physically care for their mother, in their home or ours, at any point. They also had to be the points of contact and handle all logistics, scheduling, supervision, paying the co-pays out of the shared pot. If they wanted to add their own money to extend the care, fine. There would be transparency. No rotation, no just for a few days, no guilt texts at 1 a.m. The younger one signed. He didn't look happy but his hand didn't shake. The older one refused. He said no self-respecting son signs papers to outsource his mother. He also said, loud enough for the notary to flinch, that my mom was acting like an American and not like a Greek. My mom said, I was raised by Greeks in America who taught me better than to abandon one child to save appearances with the others. The social worker called while they were still arguing and said the hospital couldn't keep their mother much longer. The wives had sent a cousin to tell the hospital she couldn't come home without a nurse. We left the older one in the notary's office to sulk and went to meet the agency rep. The caregiver started that same evening. A small woman from Georgia, the country, very practical and kind, who hugged my mom's hand even though they'd just met and said, "Don't worry. My job is to worry." It stabilized the situation, but it didn't smooth the pride. The older uncle started telling distant relatives that my mom had locked their mother away. He didn't mention that she was in her own house, in her own bed, with a caregiver making soup and changing sheets. He also left out that he tried to pull the caregiver aside and pay her cash to say she wasn't needed on his days. She called the agency, who called the notary, and we updated the agreement to include that any interference would cancel our contribution immediately. He is not used to being the one who gets told no. Seeing it in writing seemed to be the only language he understands. In the middle of all this, my wedding happened. We kept them on the guest list like we had decided, and I immediately wondered if I had made a mistake when they walked in late as a unit, the two brothers with tight smiles and their wives behind them. Maria didn't come. She'd moved out 3 days earlier. She showed up at our house with a small suitcase, eyes red but determined, and said, "I can't do another month." My dad carried her suitcase to the spare room and my mom put a plate of food in front of her like she had been living with us for years. We found her a lawyer in Athens who didn't make her feel like she was committing a crime for wanting to leave a man she no longer respected. She stayed with us through the wedding. She helped me zip my dress and cried in the hallway and told me I looked like the kind of bride who takes off her heels at midnight and keeps dancing. She was right. At the reception, the older uncle tried to make a toast. He tapped his glass and started with, "Since we're all here as family," and my dad stood up. My father has the energy of a gentle bulldozer when he's calm. He said, "Family is a verb," and then he talked about the two people who taught him what it meant, my grandparents, the ones who raised my mom. He talked about how they didn't share blood but shared decades of bills and laughter and obligations and dinners where there was always room for one more. He finished by raising his glass to people who show up, and to the ones who refuse to weigh love on a scale. It was not an angry speech. It was worse for someone like my uncle. It was a mirror. The DJ saved us all by starting the music early. My uncle sat down and didn't try again. They left right after dessert. The younger one hugged my mom before he left and whispered something I didn't catch. My mom just nodded and patted his back like he was a boy. 2 days later, a neighbor from the village called my mom and told her the older uncle had brought their mother to the church for a blessing and told anyone who would listen that the Xena daughter refuses to do her duty. My mom didn't take the bait. She baked a cake and brought it to the caregiver on her day off with an extra envelope that said "For you," because that woman has been the only steady thing in this. It made me laugh that my mother essentially adopted the caregiver while refusing to be adopted into a narrative she never agreed to. The most surreal moment came from their mother. The caregiver called my mom one afternoon and said, "She is asking for you. Do you want to come?" My mom said no and then yes and then no again and then yes. We drove out. I sat in the car with my fiancé. My mom went into that house alone. I don't know what I expected when she came back out. She was pale but composed. She asked me for forgiveness. I told her I don't have it to give, but I also told her I won't use the last days of her life to punish her for the first days of mine. It wasn't a movie reconciliation. She didn't call her mom. But she let the caregiver wrap a shawl around her mother's shoulders and she poured her a glass of water and she adjusted the curtain so the sun wouldn't hit her eyes. That was the full extent of the caregiving she was willing to do, and it was more than anyone had a right to ask. Maria's separation turned into a sprint. Her lawyer filed, and she moved into a small apartment near our place. The younger cousin, the one close to my fiancée, brought a box of dishes and a plant and said he was figuring out a timeline to completely cut contact. He looked relieved when he said it out loud, like a decision becomes real in the hearing of it. He got a job offer in a different city and took it. His father didn't congratulate him. He texted my mom instead. My aunt, 65F, flew back for a week and stayed with us too. She wore her trauma like a coat she couldn't take off but keeps open at the front now. She brought a small stack of old photos in a brown envelope and one was of a baby in a white christening gown on a quilt, and when my mom turned it over there was a name written in careful handwriting and a date that matched her birthday, by 2 days. My aunt said she found it tucked behind a framed icon in their mother's bedroom. My mom's name on the back was not the name she grew up with, it was the name she was baptized with and then denied. She kept the photo. She said she didn't feel a surge of love, just a peculiar sense of weight slipping off an anchor she has carried around without realizing she could set it down. The older uncle tried one last time to reframe the narrative. He dropped by without calling and started in on fresh guilt. The village is talking, our mother is crying for you, we all make sacrifices. My mom walked him out onto the porch and said, I sacrificed 38 years of not knowing who I was. I am done. Then she closed the door. My dad installed a doorbell camera the same day and my fiancé put the feed on my mom's phone. The next time someone rang and stood too long without speaking into the speaker, my mom watched him through the app and turned off the volume. I know it sounds small, but watching her choose her piece with her thumb was one of the most satisfying things I've seen. There has been fallout. A second cousin called to tell my mom she was brave, then asked for the caregiver's number because her own mother is starting to struggle, and she wanted to know how we made it work without screaming at each other. My mom gave her the number and said, get a notary. Maria came with us to choose curtains for her new place and asked my mom if it was too late for them to be sisters. My mom told her that sisters are also a verb. They made soup together that night and it tasted like something you make for someone after a long illness breaks. We have 3 weeks left on the contract for the caregiver. The younger uncle has been decent during this phase, practical even, sending receipts and asking appropriate questions like a person who finally realized adult life is mostly logistics. The older one tried to slip an envelope of cash to the caregiver again to cover the weeks when my sister isn't paying, which the caregiver again reported. The agency emailed everyone with please refrain from offering cash, all transactions must go through the agency, and I swear I could hear the sound of his ego having an allergic reaction through the screen. If they choose to continue with the caregiver after the 3 months, that's their choice. If they don't, we've done what we said we would do. The social worker told my mom quietly that she wished more families would put things in writing before they started breaking each other. My mom keeps that photo on her dresser now, the one with the wrong name and the right date. She said it helps her remember that so much of what happened to her wasn't personal, which makes it both more and less heartbreaking. She has decided she will see their mother once more if the caregiver calls again, but only on her terms and only for a short time. She won't hold her hand and she won't lie and say it's okay. She will make sure the pillow is fluffed and the glass is full and the window isn't open too wide. Then she will come back to the life she built with the people who did the verb part of family with her. I thought things would feel uglier after holding the line. They don't. They feel quieter. There's a lot of grief in the quiet if you listen long enough, but there's also relief. We're planning a small dinner at our place for my aunt and Maria to celebrate Maria's first week in her own apartment. My cousin will come if he can get away from his new job. My dad will grill and tell stories. My mom keeps drifting through the kitchen humming an old song her parents in Texas used to play on the radio while they cooked, a song about taking the long way home and finally arriving. It's taken decades, but I think that's what she's doing. Update 3. The contract ran out on a Wednesday, the kind of October day that pretends it's still summer until the sun drops behind the hills and you remember your cardigan in the car. The agency called the day before to ask if we wanted to renew. My mom said, it's your mother, your decision, to her brothers in the group thread. The younger one typed yes like a person who has finally learned the dimensions of a problem. The older one said, no stranger is sleeping in my mother's house another night, like pride kept time better than a pulse ox. The caregiver showed up for her last shift anyway. She told my mom on the phone she'd stay until midnight so no one could pretend they didn't have time to decide. At 11:40 p.m., the older uncle arrived with a plastic bag of oranges and told the caregiver to take the oranges and go. She smiled, handed the oranges back, and said, my contract ends at midnight. He stood in the doorway rubbing his jaw like someone who'd bitten down on a pit he didn't know was there. They didn't renew. 2 days later, their mother aspirated on soup and the younger uncle called an ambulance. He called my mom second, not to ask for help, but to say he was sorry and that he tried. The older one didn't call anyone. The hospital lights were the same 2 bright white they always are. The same social worker from last time recognized us and said, back again, with the kind of soft that people who work with endings learn to keep in their pockets. Their mother was smaller than last month, sharper around the bones, and folded into herself in a way that looked more like a closing door than sleep. They needed a consent for palliative meds. The older uncle brought a pen to my mother and said, "You're the daughter," and my mom didn't even lift her hand. "I'm not your solution," she said. The younger one signed. He did it like a person who understood signatures have weight and that sometimes you carry them because there is no one else. She died on a Sunday morning at 4:12 a.m. The caregiver called my mom at 6, even though she wasn't officially in their lives anymore. "I thought you would want to hear it from someone who is not a man who keeps oranges in a plastic bag," she said. It's astonishing how tenderness finds its way through doorways where pride wedges itself like furniture. The funeral was set for Tuesday. The call started before breakfast. The older uncle said my mom should take her rightful place in front of the coffin. He said first daughter like a title he was finally willing to bestow because it served the optics. My mom said she would come and sit where she wanted. He said the village would talk. She said the village had been talking since 1956 and could tire itself out without her help. In the car on the way there, my mom stared straight ahead and pressed the edge of the photo my aunt found, the christening gown and the wrong name, between her hands like a prayer card, the paper gone soft at the corners from being handled. Greek funerals have their own choreography. The church smelled like beeswax and damp stone, and the priest spoke in that even cadence that works like a metronome for grief. My mom stood at the back between my dad and Maria. My aunt flew in and made it in time. She slid her hand into my mom's and didn't let go during the parts where people cross themselves in unison and you can feel the tide of other people's sorrow nudge your balance. The older uncle tried to motion my mom forward during the last kiss, that moment when everyone passes to kiss the icon and the forehead of the dead. She took one step into the aisle and then stopped. She bowed her head to the icon. She didn't bend to the body. The priest's eyes flicked up and understood. After, at the cemetery, the son did that Greek thing where it blasts everything clean, even the ugly parts. They lowered her into the ground, earth thudding on pine, and the older uncle gave a speech about sacrifice that included the words daughter and honor so many times they lost their edges. My dad didn't speak this time. He stood with his arm around my mom and let the speech float past like a bird you don't invite inside. The young cousin came, took off his sunglasses, and looked at his father for a long time without flinching. He came to us after and said, "I'm leaving tonight," and I knew he meant more than the town. We went to the cafe where funerals go after they become coffee and kalava. The owner brought cups on a big round tray and a plate of paxomadia and whispered Zoe se mas, the Greek wish that the living have life. People hugged my mother in that European way where you press cheeks and breathe each other's air. Some used the baptized name. It landed in her ear like a bell rung in another room. A woman who had known her as a rumor for 60 years cried into my mother's shoulder and said, "We should have told you," and my mom said, "Yes," and that was all. No softening. No absolution. Just the truth placed on the table like a set of keys. 2 days later, a notary in the town called. He had a sealed envelope lodged by their mother a year ago, addressed in a careful old lady hand to the baptized name with a note to deliver after my soul leaves this earth. We drove out, expecting either poison or nothing. It was neither. He slid a brown envelope across the desk like it might bite. Inside was a short letter written in blue ink that wandered across the lines like someone being honest for the first time and not knowing how much room it takes. It was not a proper apology, it was a confession in the form of inventory. I gave you away because I was frightened of hunger. I told people you died so I would not have to answer their eyes. I hated your aunt because she did what I did not do, she loved a girl. It also had 3 folded items, a baptismal certificate with the name my aunt had found on the photo, a small cross on a thin chain that had gone dull with years in a box, and a receipt, of all things, brittle and brown, for a money order sent from Texas. In 1969, payable to my grandmother, my mother's adoptive mother. The note next to it said, "She wrote me every Christmas until she died." I didn't write back. The notary had logged the envelope a year ago. The older uncle tried to argue that all items should be inventoried into the estate. The notary, who looked like he'd been a man for whom rules are a friend all his life, pointed to the date and the registry entry and said, "This is a delivery, not an inheritance." The older uncle left with his jaw tight enough to crack a nut. There were the expected logistics. A man from the funeral home followed us into the street to ask who would pay for the headstone. The older uncle sent a message requesting my mother's 1/4 for the service meal and the memorial wreaths and the good priest. My mom sent back, "I will cover the kalava for the 40 days and light a candle. That is what I can give." She asked the baker in our neighborhood to make the kalava the way her parents in Texas did for Greek funerals there, studded with pomegranate and almonds, sugared with restraint. She brought it to the mnemosino and set it on the table with a small card that read for the soul of, name, from her daughters. She did not write daughter to appease anyone. She wrote daughters because her sister asked her to and because that is the verb they have decided to be. Maria's divorce moved from papers to reality. In Greece, if both parties agree, you can go to a notary with your lawyers and dissolve a marriage with less ceremony than you used to get a driver's license. He did not agree. He wanted her to think it over until Easter, as if years of thinking needed a holiday to be valid. Her lawyer filed contested. When the first hearing date came, he didn't show. Maria both laughed and cried, which I'm learning are not opposites but neighbors. She found a job at a shop that makes curtains and table linens. The first day she came home with her hands smelling like new fabric and starch, and she and my mom stood in the kitchen and argued about whether curtains should graze the floor or sit above it in a way that sounded like two people who have more time ahead of them than behind in each other's lives. The younger cousin moved to Thessaloniki. We drove up to help him carry boxes. He led us onto a balcony that looked over a cross-stitch of roofs and told us he'd never slept so hard. He took us to a tiny place near Kamara and put plates of bugitsa in front of us and said, "This is the only decision I've made that felt like mine completely." He showed my fiancé his offer letter like a kid with a report card, then put it face down and said, "I told my father I won't be coming for the 40 days. It landed on the table like something fragile and necessary. There were small kindnesses I keep wanting to write down so I don't forget them. The priest sent a bag of basil from the church garden to my mother with a note, "For your yard." My dad fixed a loose cabinet door in Maria's new kitchen and then took the spoons out and rearranged them because he said handiness should include an opinion. The caregiver stopped by with a Tupperware of kachapuri and a calendar from her church that had all the saints' days marked, as if we might get confused about when to be gentle. My mom put the small cross on a chain and hung it on a nail above the kitchen door next to the ceramic horseshoe she brought from Austin 20 years ago, as if both Lux could negotiate on our behalf. The older uncle did one more theatrical gesture. He came to our gate and left a wreath like a marathoner who didn't finish the race but wanted the photo. The doorbell camera caught him adjusting it 3 times so the ribbon with your daughter faced the street. My mom let it hang for an hour, then took it down and started pulling the ribbon off with long, steady movements. She handed me the ribbon and said, "Cut it into pieces so it fits the trash." It felt a little like magic and a lot like maintenance. On the 40 days, we drove back to the village with the kalava and a plate of lucomades because my dad insists all milestones deserve something fried in honey. The older uncle sat in the front pew, rigid. The younger one came late and stood at the back with us. The priest read the names. When he reached hers, he paused and then said both my mom's names, the adopted one and the baptized one after the other, like beads on a string. My mom's shoulders dropped a fraction. After the service, in the courtyard, a woman who had been a girl when my mom was carried out of that village in someone else's arms came over and said, "We were cruel by being quiet." My mom said, "We all were," and then she put a spoonful of kalava on the woman's plate. When we got home, there was another call from the notary. He had finished the inventory for the estate. It was exactly the opposite of news. The house went to the sons, as expected. The land was already in their names. There was a small pile of debts and a larger pile of pride. Tucked at the end of the letter was a line that made me sit down on the floor. The deceased left instructions to the parish priest to give to my mom's baptized name, a small icon of Panagia which was hanging in the bedroom. It was the one my aunt had moved to find the photo. The priest walked it over himself that afternoon and put it on our table like it was a sleeping bird. On the back, in pencil, there was a faint circle, the kind people draw when they're thinking. No words. Just a mark that said, "I touched this." My mom picked it up with both hands and said, "I will hang it, but I won't pray to it for things that are not possible." There are practical pieces sifting down now the way dust is after a piece of furniture is moved. The younger uncle has been normal. We got a message from him asking my mom what kind of flowers their mother liked and then I should know, but I don't. He thanked my mom for the kalava. He did not thank her for anything bigger because he has not learned how. That's okay, you don't learn a language in a day, even if it was the first one you heard. The older one sent a single text that said, "You made your choice." My mom wrote back, "So did everyone," and put her phone face down in the fruit bowl. I thought the end would feel like a cliff, but it turned out to be a long, flat stretch of road with a bench under a tree at the edge. My mom sits on that bench sometimes with Maria or my aunt or, on a good day, both. They talk about recipes and work and the way the light hits the neighbor's tomato plants. Sometimes they don't talk. They stack quiet on quiet until it feels like a kind of courage. The last new thing is so ordinary it almost doesn't fit here, except it belongs front and center in a story that has been about what we choose when the past is a room with too many doors. My mom went to the municipal office with my dad to renew some paperwork. The clerk asked, "What name do you go by?" And my mom said both, one after the other, like the priest did, and then she laughed and said, "Depends which kitchen I'm in." On the way out, she bought a plant from the old lady who sells herbs by the bus stop. Basil again. We brought it home and put it on the balcony. It smells like summer. It smells like starting over without pretending you didn't begin somewhere else.